You know, I have to tell you the reality that we're in right now in America, where one portion of the country just refuses to let go of their support for the man that we're about to discuss, honestly disturbs me. We have so much to go through in this story, all of it super important, so stick around for it. I want to start with some reporting that was put out by the Washington Post that outlines just how many people who previously worked for Trump are now saying he can never be president again. It's titled, "Many Former Trump Aides Say He Shouldn't Be President. Will It Matter?" And the answer, unfortunately, for a lot of Americans is no. It's not going to matter. But diving into some of this reporting, you get a new quote from Trump's former Chief of Staff, General John Kelly, that reads, quote, "What's going on in the country that a single person thinks this guy would still be a good president?" This is Trump's former Chief of Staff. When he said the things he said and done the things he's done, Kelly said in an interview, "It's beyond my comprehension he has the support that he has." Kelly, a retired four-star general, said he didn't know what to do or what he could do to help people see it his way. Quote, "I came out and told people the awful things he said about wounded soldiers, and it didn't have half a day's bounce. You had his Attorney General Bill Barr come out and not a half a day's bounce. If anything, his numbers go up. It might even move the needle in the wrong direction. I think we're in a dangerous zone in our country," he said. And John Kelly mentioned there the fact that he came out and told the pro-military party that their dear leader called wounded soldiers and POWs suckers and losers because there was, quote unquote, nothing in it for them. He told the country that Trump didn't want to be seen with amputees because it didn't look good for him. And the supporters of Trump just didn't and don't care. A four-star general is publicly saying that Trump is viciously disparaging to those who give everything for our country. And that backs up previous reporting about other people hearing those same remarks. And they just don't care. It is actually disturbing. What on earth would actually have to happen for his hardcore supporters to stop supporting him? I don't think we took literally initially Trump saying that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and his supporters would be fine with it and he wouldn't lose a single supporter. But I think that is literally true potentially. For the first time in American history, Trump, as the sitting president, tried to block the peaceful transfer of power. He's a civilly liable rapist. He was found liable for business fraud. He's been indicted 4 times, called for the termination of the Constitution, all of these different things. But he's going to destroy his competitors in the Republican primary. I cover this every single day and still I'm baffled by it. And how do you see all of these people who worked loyally alongside Trump, who Trump would say were trustworthy and respected people, and they're now saying this guy can't become president again, and believe, yeah, they're all lying? I mean, you have Bill Barr, James Mattis, Mark Esper, Mark Milley, Rex Tillerson, H.R. McMaster, John Bolton, John Kelly, Mick Mulvaney, Anthony Scaramucci, Stephanie Grisham, Michael Cohen, Ty Cobb, Allison Farrah Griffin, Sarah Matthews, Cassidy Hutchinson, and it goes on and on and on. But somehow they're all lying in the minds of Trump's supporters. And Trump's the one person telling the truth. Not to mention the dozens of grand jury jurors. They're all in on the conspiracy, I guess. All the prosecutors, of course. Every judge. Everyone. But Trump, he's the one guy with the truth. And I'll remind you of a clip that we've previously looked at of Cassidy Hutchinson, a former Trump administration aide, saying this.
I know you've been reluctant to say who you're going to vote for, but are you leaving the door open to voting for Joe Biden if it's between the two of them?
I will say my door is completely shut to voting for Donald Trump. And the only reason that I will not endorse a candidate right now is because I still am hopeful that Donald Trump does not end up being the nominee next year. I think our country will be in a much better place overall, not just for myself, but the ticket and the future of our country will be. But what I will say too, though, is I think everybody should vote for Joe Biden if they want our democracy to survive.
And then we're also getting reporting that a former Trump lawyer, Ty Cobb, said this, quote, "Our adversaries and our allies both recognize that even his potential reelection, Trump that is, diminishes America on the world stage and ensures continued acceleration of the domestic decline we are currently enduring. If that re-election actually happens, the consequences will extinguish what, if any, remains of the American dream. Whoa. Now we can complain about MAGA not caring about this all that we want, but what are we actually going to do about it? What's actionable? Because this video is coming out around Thanksgiving, in honor of that, I'll specify, I'm not calling you to action to convince your relatives to care about this and change their view on Trump over Thanksgiving. Don't do that. Instead, I want to discuss how Democrats, how the left can and should be better. One of the reasons Trump is polling as high as he is and the 2024 election is going to be as competitive as it is because of an unequal political landscape that we operate within. And that reality could doom us in 2024 if we don't adjust quickly. Here's a really interesting part of a segment on Chris Hayes' show on MSNBC where David Roberts breaks down what I'm talking about.
Next year will be an even more explicit referendum on the future of American democracy. And yet, there's this maddening set of rhetorical incentives driving all different factions of the American electorate and institutions and media to criticize the person representing the pro-democracy forces in that referendum, President Joe Biden. As writer David Roberts puts it, quote, there is no faction in U.S. politics, barely even elected Democrats, for whom praising Democrats is socially advantageous. It is, from almost every vantage point, uncool. Just try it on Twitter to see for yourself. And joining me now is David Roberts, author of the fantastic Volts newsletter, host of the Volts podcast, which is about clean energy and politics. David, I thought your thread the other day was fascinating about the rhetorical incentives that a whole variety of factions, ostensibly on the center left or in the establishment of American life, have towards their views of the current incumbent American president and what to say about him. Run me through your argument.
Yeah, this has been striking me for years, and it's only gotten more acute lately, I think. Obviously, anytime you watch right-wing media, Republican media, it's wall-to-wall criticism of Democrats, even more so than praise of Republicans. Humanizing Democrats has been the core of Fox's reason for being since it was born. And then you have the left, the sort of far left, the progressives, who, for good reasons, I think, want to move the Dems left and want the Dems to be more ambitious, and so are constantly criticizing Dems from the left to the point that it's become kind of a rigid habit that they do regardless, no matter what happens. And then you have these sort of, these sort of thoughtful centrist Dem pundits, all of whom need to show the other thoughtful centrist Dem pundits how independent they are, the fact they're not partisans, they're not team players, they're thinking for themselves. And the way to do that is by criticizing their own party. And so if you go down the list, you'll notice there's no one left who actually just wants to go tell voters what Democrats have accomplished, what Dems are doing, who wants to actually be partisan for Democrats. It's a weird thing that there's one of two political parties that has effectively very little spokespeople in the media. Everyone has incentive to criticize them. No one has the incentive to defend them.
And he's exactly correct to sort of restate what he said there. On one side, you have the right-wing media world bashing Biden and Democrats 24/7, no matter what. Then in centrist and left of center media, you have barely anyone willing to accurately assess the successes of many elected Democrats. And I'll say what I've said many times on this. This doesn't mean we try to be the mirror of Fox News. Absolutely not. Ugh. I'm saying the current conditions of the moment necessitate honest and accurate discussions, but like super often about just how successful Biden's administration and Democrats in Congress have been over the last few years. David Roberts said it perfectly. Progressives, we get used to pushing for more, which is great. We want to do that, make the Democratic Party better. But that causes sometimes people to never acknowledge and then promote big accomplishments on the part of Democrats. Then you have centrists who want to prove they're above partisanship so badly that they won't just say, hey, what Biden did there, really good. And then obviously right-wing media, just full attack mode all the time. So that leaves a pretty tiny sliver of people who are accurately notifying people about this important stuff. And as my friend Josiah from Pondering Politics often says, the idea that facts speak for themselves is true in politics is absurd. They don't speak for themselves. We have to raise awareness about facts. And we can't be needlessly kneecapping the pro-democracy side of this election because whatever, we want to prove just how independent and pure we are. That's actually more biased than fairly and factually breaking down these accomplishments. Now, if you just came across my channel, you might be wondering, what the heck is this guy talking about? What accomplishments is there to speak of? And in the last couple of weeks, I've gone through the same list so many times. So I won't do it again because I know my daily viewers and listeners have heard it too many times potentially. I don't want to bore them. Okay, so I'm not going to talk about, not even going to mention the once in a generation infrastructure law that Biden signed into law or the American Rescue Plan that helped to bring back the American economy post-COVID. I won't even get into talking about the Inflation Reduction Act that's making unprecedented investments in green energy, lowering prescription drug costs, expanding healthcare coverage, among other things. I refuse to mention the PACT Act, the Expanded Veterans Healthcare, or the Chips and Science Act that's investing in American manufacturing. I don't want to bore my daily viewers and talk about the student debt relief that's been historic, or the protection for marriage equality, or the fact that Biden did what his predecessors were afraid to do and ended America's longest war. Other presidents knew that was going to be a disaster and would hurt them politically, thus they didn't do it. Biden got it done. It was a disaster, but we knew it would be. Again, that's why other presidents avoided doing it, among other reasons. I know you don't want to hear about the economic recovery that way exceeded expectations, the fact that the economy is back to a strong condition after an unprecedented pandemic and economic downturn. By the way, if you're interested in that, find a video on the channel titled OMG, Trump Releases Disturbing Video on True Social. And in that video, I break down the economic superiority of Biden versus Trump. Trump took over a good economy and then didn't mess up economic trends until COVID. Biden took over a bad economy and brought it back to life. I'm just not going to get into any of those things. I'm not going to tell you about that list again or the fact that all that happened with a razor thin margin in Congress. Just not even going to get into that in this video. But if commentators who are not right wing are honest, they would tout those successes more often. And all the other ones, like Biden's incredible record on labor, his NLRB. Everyone knows Biden's 81. Okay, we get it. There's been about 2 billion stories about that. No one else needs to be notified of that fact. But a lot of people need to be notified about the facts that I just walked through and all the other stuff we talked about in the past as well. That's why I go over them so often. There is a strong fact-based case to be made that Biden is the most effective president in the last 50 years. And most people out in the world that I've said that to initially laugh or go, no, because the media is failing to discuss it. But then you walk through the facts and people are quickly convinced. And when you show the policy record of Biden and discuss that with people, we talked about that poll where his approval rating increases. People see him more favorably. Obviously, it takes being notified of this information. And by the way, I think a lot of people feel like touting the successes of Biden's economic recovery and his policies means you're invalidating people's feelings about their own economic pain. Not at all. We just have to have these conversations in a nuanced manner. What was the context in which Biden took over? What did he have the power to do? And then what did he do? And how did that turn out? And when you do that analysis, you realize there are, of course, still a lot of problems that need to be addressed. And also, Biden's presidency so far has been really successful. Now, there is increasingly a discussion going on in the media, which I'm happy to see, about how the feelings about Biden's handling of the economy don't line up with the economic metrics we typically use to judge such a subject. You have headlines like this from CNN, why Biden's strong economy feels so bad to most Americans. And there are a lot of factors, of course, post-pandemic shock. I do think media coverage plays into it. And then also the higher prices due to inflation that was an economic aftermath of the recovery efforts because of the pandemic. By the way, a lot of that happened under Trump. And luckily, inflation is slowing rapidly. And the US has been experiencing less inflation than other comparable economies, all things we've discussed many times in the past. So clearly, Biden isn't making it worse than it would have been otherwise, potentially making it much better. But unfortunately, you have this 24/7 surround sound negativity echo chamber on the right wing that tries to convince everyone that Biden's destroying the country. And they've been predicting for like his whole presidency now that he's just about to send us into a recession. and then the economy just keeps getting stronger and stronger. I was happy to see Stephanie Ruhle on MSNBC pointing this out.
Let's talk about some facts and feelings. What a difference a year makes. Last November, economists and business leaders predicted that today we would be in a deep recession. Well, guess what? That did not happen. By so many measures, the economy is in good shape. Unemployment near 50-year lows. Wages going up. The economy, it is growing. Inflation, it is slowing. This holiday, a lot of things are less expensive than they were a year ago. Thanksgiving dinner, gas prices, airfares. Now, I know polls are showing us that Americans feel like the economy is in bad shape. You would think, given what people are saying, we're in a recession, but we are not. And here's the thing. We're also not acting like we're in a recession. Holiday spending looks like it is going to hit a new record. As my colleague Tom Costello reports, holiday weekend travel could do the same, even if the weather doesn't cooperate.
So all of what we just talked about is to say one of the reasons Trump is able to hold on to as much support as he currently does, as John Kelly's rightfully baffled by, is because of a lot of confusion about different important subjects. So his hardcore supporters, they're going to vote for him no matter what. Don't even have to worry about trying to get to them. But other people may fall for the idea that he's some great thing for the economy and vote based on that. Again, see my past debunking of that. And so in a moment when democracy is on the line, we have to do everything we can, again, not to convince people who are never going to be convinced, but convince people who are in the center and left of center to be motivated to vote in 2024 for the right candidate, both for democracy and, yes, your individual economic well-being. Before you go, don't forget to become a member at lukebeasley.com/membership to get the daily bonus show Monday through Friday. Plus, follow me on Threads at Luke Beasley Official, Instagram at Luke Beasley Official, X at Luke P. Beasley, and sign up for the Beasley Brief, a daily morning newsletter that summarizes the previous day's events by going to lukebeasleyshow.com/brief. And I'll talk to you all next time.
Matt Gaetz made a lot of news earlier this week when he basically took out the Speaker of the House. He's continuing to make news now. According to a huge scoop from NBC News, Gaetz trashed the House Republicans' impeachment inquiry into Biden during a private online